All right, let's just get right into it today. We really need to talk about what is happening right now, because the world looks very different this morning than it did even 48 hours ago.
Yeah, it really does.
It is Friday, February 27, 2026. And if you've been feeling that tension in the headlines, that sort of, low-grade static suggesting something big is shifting from theoretical to actually happening, you are not wrong.
No, you're definitely not imagining it. The shift is palpable. It feels like the air pressure just dropped right before a storm.
Exactly. And we are looking at a stack of reports today that are frankly just startling. We've got breaking analysis from Axios, details from the New York Times, some really hard numbers from the Associated Press, and this is the one that really grabbed me, satellite imagery analysis from a Chinese space company.
That's the one that really changes the picture.
It does. And our mission today for this deep dive is simple. We are going to unpack this massive military buildup in the Middle East.
And massive might honestly be an understatement at this point.
Right. We need to understand what this deployment actually looks like on the ground, why it is fundamentally different from anything we've seen in the last 20 years, and here's where it gets really interesting, the strange, paradoxical constraints behind this show of force.
Because it is a paradox.
It is, because on paper, this looks like the U.S. is ready to just roll over anything in its path. But when you look closer at the logistics, the picture changes completely.
It's a massive paradox, and that's the part people are missing right now. But to set the stage, we really have to acknowledge the gravity of this specific moment. Just within the last few hours, we learn that President Trump has received his first formal briefing on military options against Iran from the CNTCOM chief. That's Admiral Brad Cooper.
Now, presidents get briefed all the time. Why does this specific meeting matter so much?
Specificity. According to the reporting, this wasn't a status update or a general situational awareness chat.
Right.
This was the briefing on specific strike options. And it's happening right as diplomatic talks in Geneva have effectively hit a wall. The timing isn't accidental. The briefing is essentially the punctuation mark on those stalled talks.
Okay, let's unpack this, because usually we hear military buildup and we think, okay, another aircraft carrier is moving around, maybe a few extra patrols. But the visuals we have today are painting a very specific, very aggressive picture.
Yeah.
I want to start with that satellite data. This comes from Vision, which is a Chinese commercial space company. They released images today, February 27th. What exactly are we looking at here?
Well, this is where open source intelligence, OSINT, really changes the game. You used to be able to hide these movements. Now, a commercial satellite can just spot them.
And anyone can see it.
Anyone. Vision has essentially confirmed what the rumors were suggesting. The images show Avda Air Base. That's down in Israel's Negev Desert. And sitting there on the tarmac are 11 U.S. F-22 stealth fighters.
11 F-22s just sitting in the desert. For those of you who don't spend their weekends reading Jane's Defense Weekly, why does the F-22 matter here? Why not, F-15s or F-16s?
The F-22 is a door kicker. It is the premier air dominance fighter in the world. Its job isn't to drop a bunch of bombs on trucks. Its job is to go in first, completely invisible to radar, and kill the enemy's air defense systems.
So it clears the room.
Exactly. It clears the path so the non-stealthy planes can operate safely. When you see F-22s, and specifically that many of them, you are looking at a force designed to penetrate highly contested airspace.
So it's the absolute tip of the spear.
Exactly. And seeing them at an Israeli base, that is historic. Aviation Week pointed this out today. This is the first time offensive U.S. combat aircraft have been deployed to an Israeli airbase outside of joint training exercises.
Wow.
This isn't a drill. This is a forward deployment. And it's not just the 11 in the Negev. Another 12 F-22s just arrived at RAF Lakenheath over in England. So you have a potential doubling of that stealth force to 24 jets very quickly.
Okay, so we have the stealth fighters. But the analysts spot something else in these pictures at Ben Gurion Airport that you said was actually even more significant.
Right. Simultaneously, analysts spotted at least 9 U.S. tanker aircraft arriving at Ben Gurion overnight.
Okay, help us understand the logic here. Why does that combination matter? The fighters and the tankers.
It's the recipe for a long-range strike. You don't bring in that many tankers just to fly defensive patrols. Tankers extend the reach of your fighters.
Because fighter jets burn through fuel incredibly fast.
Exactly. If you're launching from Israel and you need to project power further east toward Iran, you need mid-air refueling. The distance is significant.
Right.
So the presence of the tankers confirms that the fighters aren't there for a show of force or just defense. They're being prepped for operational range. They're being fueled to go somewhere.
It feels like the pieces are being moved into attack positions on a board. But let's zoom out a bit. We've got the stealth jets, we've got the tankers in Israel. But the Associated Press is reporting some theater-wide numbers that are just staggering.
The scale is what makes this comparable to 2003. That is the only comparison that really fits right now.
2003, as in the invasion of Iraq.
Exactly. According to the AP, since mid-February, the U.S. has moved over 100 fighter jets into the region. We're talking F-35s, F-15s, F-16s, plus over 100 tanker aircraft.
Wait, pause on that. 100 tankers, that sounds excessive.
It sounds excessive because it is enormous. That is a massive percentage of the entire U.S. tanker fleet.
Wow.
That creates a logistical backbone that allows you to keep dozens of aircraft in the air 24/7. And then you add the heavy lift. Over 200 tracked cargo planes. That is an enormous amount of equipment being shoved into the theater all at once.
And we can't forget the naval presence either.
Right. 2 carrier strike groups, the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald R. Ford, are operating there right now. That brings the naval presence to at least 16 ships.
16 ships, 2 nuclear-powered carriers, hundreds of aircraft. When was the last time we saw this much American hardware concentrated in the Middle East?
Like I said, not since the invasion of Iraq. This isn't a rotation. This is a war footing.
So if you're looking at this from the outside, if you're just reading the AP headlines over your morning coffee, you say, okay, the U.S. is ready for anything. They are locked and loaded for a massive, prolonged war.
And that is exactly where you would be wrong. And this is the twist I mentioned earlier.
Yes, this is the part of the research stack that really surprised me. Because we have this image of a juggernaut, but the New York Times is reporting something that feels like a massive contradiction to all those hardware numbers.
It is the sprint versus marathon problem. 2 military officials leaked an assessment to the Times that is absolutely critical to understanding this whole situation.
What did they say?
They said that despite this massive volume of hardware, the jets, the carriers, the ships, the Pentagon actually lacks the troops and, crucially, the munitions for a prolonged campaign.
How is that even possible with 2 carrier groups? We spend nearly $1 trillion a year on defense. How do we not have enough ammo?
Because modern warfare consumes munitions at a rate that is, frankly, hard to comprehend. We saw this in Ukraine, we saw it in Gaza. Precision-guided munitions, interceptors, bunker busters, they are incredibly expensive to make, and we just don't have infinite stockpiles of them.
Okay, so what is the actual limit here?
One official estimated that the current force, as scary and large as it looks, could sustain continuous high-intensity attacks for only about 7 to 10 days.
7 to 10 days, that's it.
That's the estimate for the high-end stuff. After that, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel, or you're relying on dumb bombs, which you really can't use against sophisticated air defenses without risking losing your planes.
So it's essentially a glass cannon, or a very, very loud hammer that you can only swing a few times before the handle snaps.
Precisely. And that creates this incredible high-stakes tension. The administration is trying to demonstrate resolve. They're showing Iran a force that can literally level infrastructure overnight. But technically, logistically, they are not set up for a month-long or year-long grind.
Right.
It's a shock and awe force, not an occupation force. It's built for a sprint.
That puts a completely different spin on the entire strategy. If you know you only have 10 days of ammo, you can't exactly bluff forever. But I want to pivot to the map for a second.
Sure.
Because usually when we talk about the U.S. operating in the Middle East, we talk about the Gulf, we talk about Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE. That's where the massive, sprawling American bases are.
Traditionally, yes. That has been the standard playbook since Desert Storm. You stage your assets in the Gulf and you fly north or west.
But I'm looking at reports here from Fox News and the Wall Street Journal, and they're saying the neighborhood isn't playing along this time.
This is a major complication. And it entirely explains why those F-22s are sitting in Israel and not in the Gulf right now. The Gulf allies, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, and Turkey, have publicly refused to allow their airspace or their territory to be used for attacks against Iran.
That is a huge break from the past. Why the cold shoulder all of a sudden?
It's pure self-preservation. Just look at the math. If the U.S. launches a strike from a base in Saudi Arabia, where does Iran shoot back?
That's Saudi Arabia.
Right. They shoot at the base. They shoot at the Saudi oil refineries. They shoot at Dubai. The Gulf states have seen Iranian missile capabilities improve drastically over the last decade. They are effectively saying, we are sitting this one out because we actually live here.
So they're locking the doors.
Effectively, yes. And that changes the entire geometry of the operation. In the past, the U.S. had a 360-degree range of options. They could fly from the south, the east, the west.
And now?
Now the operational lane has narrowed significantly. If you can't fly over Saudi Arabia or Iraq to get to Iran, you have to find other routes.
Which makes the Israeli bases like Ofta absolutely critical.
Exactly. It forces the U.S. to rely on Israel as the primary staging ground for offensive air operations, rather than just a defensive partner. It consolidates the U.S. and Israel into a single operational entity in the eyes of the region, which carries its own massive geopolitical weight.
Yeah, no kidding.
But purely from a logistics standpoint, it makes the mission so much harder. You have fewer runways, much longer flight paths, and a much more predictable approach vector for the enemy to track.
So let's recap the constraints here for you listening. We have a massive force, but it's on a timer, 7 to 10 days of ammo. And we have a map that's actively working against us, funneling everything through a narrower corridor because our usual allies essentially said, no entry. That sounds incredibly risky.
It is incredibly high risk. You are trying to thread a needle with a sledgehammer. And remember, the narrower the corridor, the easier it is for the adversary to defend against it.
Which brings us to the why now question. Because military deployments like this, they don't happen in a vacuum. They happen because politicians make decisions. And today, February 27th, seems to be a very decisive day in Washington.
It is the day the clock started ticking much louder. We know from Axios that Admiral Brad Cooper, again, he's the commander of CENTCOM, and General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, were in the Oval Office briefing President Trump.
And as you mentioned at the top of the show, this wasn't just a casual chat.
No. This was the first briefing on specific military strike options against Iran since this particular crisis began. And the report notes that the crisis context dates back to December 2015, so this is a long simmering issue coming to a major head. But this specific meeting regarding strike options, this is the first one.
And it's not a coincidence that this briefing happened right after the diplomats came home from Geneva.
Right. The third round of nuclear talks wrapped up in Geneva. And to put it mildly, they didn't go well.
I saw some conflicting headlines on that, actually. The mediator seemed pretty hopeful.
That's classic diplomatic signaling. The mediator was Oman. They have a massive vested interest in keeping everyone calm. They called it significant progress. But you really have to look at what the actual parties are saying.
And what are they saying?
The U.S. and Iran are reportedly still far apart on the core issues, uranium enrichment and sanctions relief. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said there were some agreements, but admitted the big issues remain totally unresolved.
So Oman is out there saying glass half full, and everyone else is looking at an empty glass.
Essentially, yes. And the Trump administration's view, according to insiders, is that Geneva was a last-ditch effort. The feeling in Washington is that diplomacy has run its course.
That phrase, last ditch, is chilling when you pair it with the satellite photos of those F-22s.
It signals a definitive shift in mindset, from negotiation to compellence.
But then we have this quote from Vice President J.D. Vance. He spoke to the Washington Post, and he was very specific. He said there is absolutely no possibility that military action would lead to a years-long war.
Now, connect that back to what we discussed earlier regarding the ammunition.
The 7 to 10 day supply.
Exactly. Usually, when a politician promises a short war, historians just roll their eyes. We've heard home by Christmas before, right?
Right. It rarely works out that way.
But in this case, when the vice president says no years-long war, he isn't just making a political promise to voters. He's describing a logistical reality.
He's telling the truth because the Pentagon literally cannot fight a long war right now.
The U.S. isn't packing for a years-long war. They are packing for a week of destruction. The political rhetoric perfectly matches the military inventory.
That is fascinating. Usually politicians promise short wars, and the military prepares for long ones just in case everything goes wrong. Here, both sides seem to be completely aligning on this idea of a short, sharp shock.
But that alignment is inherently dangerous, because the enemy always gets a vote.
Right. Just because we only want to fight for 10 days doesn't mean Iran stops fighting on day 11.
Exactly. If you launch a 7-day war, you can't guarantee the other side folds on day 8. Iran knows we have allies who won't let us use their airspace. They likely know about the munition limits, too. These things aren't total secrets in the global defense world.
So if you are sitting in Tehran and you see this buildup, do you panic? Or do you just do the math?
You probably do a bit of both. It's a gamble for the U.S. It is a massive gamble that a demonstration of overwhelming force will cause the other side to fold before the U.S. literally runs out of steam.
So let's try to synthesize this for everyone listening. We are looking at a historic buildup, the biggest since 2003. F-22s, carriers, hundreds of planes. But it's a buildup that is geographically constrained because our usual allies in the Gulf said no entry. And it is logistically constrained because we simply don't have the depth of supplies for a long fight.
Correct. It is an incredibly heavy punch, but you only get to throw it once or twice.
And all of this is sitting on a hair trigger while the diplomats are arguing about uranium enrichment, knowing that the last-ditch effort might have already failed.
And technical discussions are supposed to continue in Vienna next week.
Yeah.
So we are in this bizarre window where the diplomats are talking technical details about centrifuges, while the generals are briefing the president on how to blow up the facilities those diplomats are discussing.
It feels like two trains running on the exact same track headed right for each other. One is the diplomatic track, desperately trying to slow things down. The other is this military freight train that is just speeding up.
And the president hasn't made the final decision yet. That's the important caveat from the VP's interview. But once you move this much hardware, once you put F-22s in the Negev and park 2 carriers off the coast, it becomes very expensive and very difficult to just turn around and go home without achieving something.
That's the momentum of war, isn't it? It takes on a life of its own.
It really does. A deployment of this size creates its own gravity. It demands a resolution. You can't just keep 100 tankers loitering indefinitely. Maintenance clocks are ticking on those airframes. Crews are fatiguing. The asset burns simply by being there.
So what does this all mean for us right now? We are watching a high-stakes poker game where the U.S. has pushed a massive stack of ships into the middle of the table. But the other players might know exactly how many chips we have left in our pocket.
And that raises the most critical question of all. If we go back to that sprint concept, the 10-day limit, think about leverage. If you are the adversary, if you are Iran, and you suspect that the hammer can only swing for 10 days, does this massive deployment actually deter you?
Does it make you want to sign a deal in Vienna next week?
Or does it encourage you to hunker down? Move your centrifuges deeper underground, disperse your missile launchers, weather the storm for 2 weeks, and emerge on the other side knowing the giant is out of breath.
That is the question. Does the constraint undermine the threat itself?
Or, conversely, does the U.S. administration know that time is against them? If they know they only have 10 days, does that mean the initial strike has to be 10 times more violent? Does the constraint actually force the violence to be more extreme because it has to be compressed into a shorter window?
A condensed catastrophe. That is a heavy thought to leave us with. We are watching history unfold in real time. The hardware is there, a map is drawn, the clock is ticking. We will be watching those talks in Vienna very closely next week, assuming those F-22s stay on the ground that long.
Indeed. We will be watching very closely.
Thank you for listening to this deep dive. It's a lot to process, but that's why we're here, to take the stack of reports and make sense of the noise for you. Stay safe, stay curious, and we will catch you on the next one.